So, we've discussed how to best evaluate your summer staff, your program, your policies and procedures. We've shared how we would take that information and create some strategic planning. And now we'll be talking about how to get your staff on board with any changes, big or small, that you'll be implementing this coming summer. Camp leaders, win back your time to what matters most your campers. Bolin's comprehensive accounting, back office solutions, and tech enabled team free up your staff to focus on your mission. Visit bolinhq.com, that's BOWLINEHQ.com, to learn more and book a free 2-hour financial diagnostic. Remember what sparked your passion for camp? UltraCamp knows it's about the people, not the paperwork. That's why they built a platform to simplify your camp management. Learn more at ultracampmanagement.com/campcode. Welcome to Camp Code, a podcast brought to you by Go Camp Pro. For us, in the world of summer camp, there is nothing more important than well-researched, well-planned, well-thought, and well-prepared leadership training. It's at the crux of all we do. It's how we deliver a safe, exciting, supportive, growth-filled experience for all of our campers and their families. And it's how we have our staff return year after year. And of course, it's how we make the biggest impact on the world around us. So join us today as we delve in once again to the world of staff training, the good, the hard, and everything in between. So, welcome everybody. We are really excited to continue chatting about next steps. Last episode, we talked about how to take the vision that you've created through all of your evals and turn it into some actionable steps and what tools you can use to do that. And if you haven't heard it yet, you might want to go back and listen because there were some great ideas. And today, we're going to share ideas on how to help your staff adapt to these changes. But as always, before we get started, we will introduce ourselves. Gabrielle.
Hey Beth, I'm so happy to be here. And this is all of the podcasts were important, but getting people to do the things is one of my I love it so much. So I'm really excited for this podcast. Um, but I digress. My name is Gabrielle. My pronouns are she, her, elle, and I'm one of the camp directors at Camp Waro, which is an all-girls camp in the Laurentian Mountains, and we focus on creating a positive environment for gender minorities, and we do that while speaking in French and in English.
Thanks, Gab. And I'm Beth Allison. I was a camp director and an executive director, but I'm now a camp consultant, and I'm co-owner of Camp Hacker and Go Camp Pro, and my pronouns are she, her. All right, so we are here in part 3 of preparing to make the changes you feel you have to make for 2025,
Mhm.
big or small. They could be
Yes.
sweeping changes, they could be changes to your program, they could be little tweaks. And we know that we should be doing some changes every year, even if they're small ones. But Gabs, we've done our evals,
Yeah.
we've created this plan to execute our changes, but we all know people feel very strongly about camp, and change to anything sometimes comes with strong resistance.
Yeah.
So, how do you train your staff when it comes to implementing changes at camp? How do you handle it for them?
Well. I'm going to start with some of the things that I've seen that does not work. First,
I love that.
I said it once. I expect people to do it. Does not work. I wrote it down. I expect people to read it. That does not work. The give up method. You have a great idea, but then you psych yourself up out, and you're like, nobody's going to do this, so I won't even tell anybody. That definitely does not work. And the whisper change. So you sort of
Mm,
say it very quietly, like I was really thinking that this would be a great idea. Okay, that'd be lovely. Okay, bye. Whisper change could work in some instances, but as a whole, people fall under one of these categories. You're too frustrated, you're already defeated, or you think once is enough. And I understand why you think once is enough, but we have to get into the muscle memory of it all. And we need to remember that staff members, whether they're deciding to listen to you or not, it goes way beyond that. It's not personal. But I like to not rely on staff members' brains, and that's not saying anything negative about staff members. I don't want to rely on my own brain. We have to build muscle memory when we want to implement change, meaning it needs to be part of our staff training. It needs to be something that they do so much that they're not thinking about it anymore, and their body is actually doing it. And there's a bunch of things that we're going to talk about on how to do that, but we want to focus on the experiential.
Perfect. Thanks, Gab. My number one tip is not going to be a surprise if you've been listening to our podcast for 11 seasons, but be transparent. And we say this all the time. And just recently, I came across a quote from Simon Sinek that sums that up really, really well. And he says, transparency doesn't mean sharing every detail. Transparency means providing the context for the decisions we make. So if staff understand why we're making those changes, whether they're big or small or anywhere in between, they're far more likely to be on board. So we need to start communicating these changes in a timely manner, meaning that some changes we can start putting out there right now, and some can wait until the winter or the spring. This all depends on the size of the shifts that you're making. So big things, if you're doing big cultural changes or big staffing changes, need more time for folks to process and absorb. Little changes, like you're moving, I don't know, lunch ahead 10 minutes, not so much. So take a look at what you want to implement this coming season and figure out a schedule to release those plans. And remember that we likely need to communicate the information in different ways to different audiences. So how you tell your staff what will be different will also be different from how you tell your campers or your parents or your donors. So think about the language for each group as well as each method of communication. So whether videos work best, or emails, or TikTok, or Instagram, or personal phone calls, and how often you will need to communicate these changes, because we will tell you right now, as Gab has already said, once is not enough.
Not.
So here are some questions that I like to ask myself before I share any news of changes. So number one, what is going to be the outcome that I want from this communication? What is it that I'm looking for by sending this out now? What's my outcome? Number two is I want to think about who I'm speaking to and how will this impact them? That's the important piece. How will this impact them, their job, their responsibility, their experiences? Number three, what are the key points that I want to get across? Because I don't want my message to go on and on and on. I just want, here are the key points I want you to know. And then finally, how will I most effectively share my message with these different audiences to be able to achieve those objectives? So we want to be super clear on the outcome that we want. It helps you then plan what you're going to say and how you're going to say it if you know what the outcome is. And you want to make sure that your team understands the change process and of course how it will impact them. And on top of that, you want people to feel reassured and supported and safe to express themselves. So I encourage everybody to
Mm-hmm.
make space for asking questions and raising concerns. You may even want to share how you're feeling about these changes that you have to make. Maybe you're going to need to reassure them that, of all the things that are going to remain the same, if it's a big change you're making, but these things are all staying the same, the important parts. Think about how that news may impact your staff or their responsibilities, and try to imagine any questions you think they might have before you send out the messaging. So you may not get them all, but if you think about them ahead of time, that's going to help you with your messaging. And I would also be really mindful about sending them out in just little bits. So don't overwhelm people with a lot of information all at once. Like, here are all the changes we're going to make this year, and throw it out in a big newsletter or an email. It's going to go, nobody's going to read it. And people may be upset that there's this list of changes when really, if they broke it apart, there's just a few, little changes here and there that will be made. So kind of think about how you're going to do that messaging.
Yeah. Can I tag on to that little
Yes,
piece?
please.
It fits really nicely. So for me, it's like I always have the mentality of like win them over. Like, how am I going to just win them over? Because I like it when people do things out of their own want and need, and I try to think of it of positive intent. So if somebody's not doing what I asked them to do, it's not because they're like, haha, I'm not going to do this thing. It's more that they're distracted or they forgot how to, or so that's the way I like to think of it. But before that, I'm like, how am I going to win them over? How am I going to make them be like, oh my gosh, this is what I want to do? And I think that there's three different ways that people try to win people over. And I think there's a combo pack of the three. So there's the number one, because I said so. It's maybe not the most popular and it might not stick, but if you are, paddling a boat and you need to wear a life jacket, it is I said so situation, and we don't need to get into too much of it, but yes, there we go. There's the story, so the story behind it, the
Mm-hmm.
why,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's the community. And I've said this a couple of times in on our podcast, but I really do believe in when we're making some changes at camp, bringing in a small group of people that change is going to directly impact, and talk to them about how how do we want to present it to people, because it might be a situation such as um, safety. There's a new safety measures we want to implement. So it is a I said so situation. This is safety. We're not playing with that. But here's my story to my smaller community, the why that the safety measure is being put in place. How do we want to share that with the larger community of staff members? What would be the best ways to implement this new change? How will it impact them so we can anticipate some of those changes? And dealing with a smaller group, so a lot of the times you'll get a lot more honesty, and they'll anticipate some of those needs that you might not have anticipated, but then they become also one of my favorite French sayings, which is porte-parole. They'll become the townsfolk that will sing the story of why we're doing this in a positive way, because they had access to you and you've onboarded them. So I for me, that messaging that Beth is talking about is so important. I typically try to create mini groups, and honestly, some groups are like, it's a 45-minute conversation with three people. And some of them it's much longer because it's a much bigger deal. It's a lot more moving pieces. But the going in with I'm going to win people over mentality and using a small group and telling your story, I think is such an important part of getting into that next step, which will be the muscle memory, which we're going to talk about very soon.
Perfect. Thanks, Gab.
Yeah.
Before we continue more with some brilliance from Gabrielle, we're going to take a short break to hear from our sponsors. A special offer from UltraCamp for Camp Code listeners. Get ready for next season's staff recruiting with the Camp Experience Wheel, a powerful tool to prevent burnout, boost retention, and make sure your staff feels supported. Download it for free at ultracampmanagement.com/campcode. Managing your camp shouldn't be a trade-off between quality and cost. With UltraCamp, you get powerful, user-friendly tools that are designed to fit your camp's budget. No compromises necessary. UltraCamp offers clear and flexible options with simple pricing you can trust. Low minimum entry, clear pricing with no hidden fees, flexible payment terms, and no long-term contracts. Get back to what you love. UltraCamp helps you spend less time on admin tasks and more time creating unforgettable camp experiences. Ready to see if UltraCamp is the perfect fit? Schedule your free personalized demo at ultracampmanagement.com/campcode. Camp leaders, do you often find yourself bogged down with bookkeeping, accounting, and other back office tasks, taking precious time away from what matters most, your campers? Imagine a solution that frees up your staff to focus on creating impactful and memorable experiences for your campers. That's where Bolin comes in. Bolin offers comprehensive accounting back office solutions designed specifically for camps. Our tech enabled team handles everything from payroll and bookkeeping to financial reporting, compliance, expense management, spend control, and more, allowing your staff to passionately pursue your number one purpose. With Bolin, you can streamline your camp's financial operations, reduce stress, and ensure your team is free to make a lasting impact in campers' lives. It's time to win back your time and work with a financial partner that truly understands camps. Whether you're a for-profit, not-for-profit, overnight, or day camp, Bolin has a solution for you. Visit bowlinhq.com. That's BOWLINEHQ.com to learn more and book a free 2-hour financial diagnostic. The report is yours whether you sign up or not. Let Bolin take care of your accounting needs so you can focus on what truly matters, your campers. Okay, Gab, we are back.
Yes.
What do you want to tell us about muscle memory?
Okay, everybody, I'm not going to try to bore us too much with any scientific stuff, but
I don't find it
there's
boring.
thank you so much. There is some I appreciate you so much, Beth. So basically, in the last couple of years, we've learned so much more about the brain, and especially around 2018, cameras that scanned our brains just got that much better. Just think of our phones and where they are right now, camera-wise. That's what's happening in the scientific world as well. And there's a couple of things that came to play when it comes to people learning. Beth has talked about sleep. This is really important. If you haven't adjusted your schedule for your staff to get proper amount of sleep, you should, because you're just wasting your money because you're not really able to, you know, absorb the information. But I digress. We want people to do something new. So one of the things to help dendrites, or I like to call them daisies, grow in our brains. These are parts of our brain that helps with communication of new information and make it part of your muscle memory, is to tell them something one day, get them to do that thing that same day. And then the following day has to be after sleep. So 24 hours later, or even 48 hours later, get them to do the same thing again. So they need to physically actually have to do it. So here's an example, dealing with a homesick camper. You give your staff, here are, 3 or 4 things that we do when a camper's missing home. This is the follow-up we ask you to do so that it's getting communicated to our to the supervisors, and that's the lesson. Then we practice role playing. That's the doing part. And then 2 days later or the next day, you have some scenarios. It could be, you're teaching staff members, how your dining room works, let's just say. Throw in a scenario of a homesick camper and make sure that they do some of those steps and that they do some of the follow through. Maybe follow through is the new piece that you're adding in. Maybe they're great with the homesickness, but they keep forgetting to tell their supervisor that their kid was missing home. And therefore, we can't tell the families. And therefore, we look like ding dongs when parents are like, they've been crying for 3 days. And you're like, what? Oh, yes, I just found out. So maybe the follow through is the piece that's really, really important. So we've told our staff why. We've told them that there's issues with the families. We know that our staff don't really deal with families, so they don't have that repercussion like our supervisors do. And and after the 48 hours, if they do those scenarios and they don't do that follow-up piece, you do a friendly reminder. All of that together, the success rate of implementing and the success rate of muscle memory goes up by 80% than if you just
Wow.
tell them in a session. And
Mm-hmm.
I would actually, as somebody that has been running camps for a long time, I would say it's almost a zero success rate if you don't do that. There's a very few amount of us that are Beth brains that would be like, oh, I need to follow up. I'm going to take a note and I'm going to make sure it's going to happen. The rest of us, more like the Travis in the past podcast that we had, and myself, would definitely not. So you have to build it into their muscle memory. So teach them something one day, get them to try it that day, and then it doesn't have to be official. Just get them to try it again.
Perfect. Thank you. And even if you can remember and you
Mm-hmm.
make a note, it's still good to be able to practice it and get to feel more comfortable with it, which is what I would want to do
Yeah.
before the kids showed up, is to
The
feel a bit more comfortable.
confidence.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
think I think the other thing that we forget to talk about when it comes to implementing change is the power of groupthink. A lot of times we look at groupthink as something that's negative. But when you see your peers doing this one thing, when you see other people doing this one thing, it does give you permission to do it, even if it's positive. And I'm taking a class right now on basically online production of, like, it's to help Beth and I upping our game and our podcasting. And it's also something that's fun for me, that's new for me to learn. But I had like first school day jitters. I was like, what should I wear? What should be my background? I didn't know what was expected of me. And then anyways, I looked great, so I was fine. First day, I was cool. But the facilitator asked, where are we from? And then nobody was messaging. And then I think he had a couple of people, which I actually are his support people, I realized afterwards, started using the messenger and sharing where they were from. And then quickly, all 60
Mm-hmm.
participants started doing that. So I think it's the same thing in anything that we're doing new at camp. People have to see other people doing it. And muscle memory is part of that because you're building in, or the training of the muscle memory is part of that. You're getting them to actually do it. And that's, we can't underestimate how important that is.
Great. Thank you. I'm going to take us back a bit to messaging because I just have a couple more things to think about in terms of
Love it.
front loading. So there's my first time using that word this season, but you
Uh,
all knew it was coming.
I
So
mean, episode 4,
I know,
and
right?
that's the first time. My goodness.
So think about timing. When is it best to send out this information of change? Again, do they need more time to absorb and ask questions, or is it just kind of heads up kind of message? Like parents will be picking kids up at 4:15 every day instead of 4 o'clock, whatever it is. So if it's maybe challenging information, is there a day of the week or a time of day that would be better for this information to land in somebody's inbox? Do you want to tell them that you're, getting rid of some big tradition that they've had for years and years because you've discovered it's not appropriate and so on right before exam week? Like, think about when you're going to be giving these messages. If it's a really big change, and not many of us make really big ones every summer, but if it is, should you invite all of your staff to a Zoom meeting so that you can tell them in person? Communicating change can be nerve-wracking depending on the depth of the change, and being prepared just helps you cover everything that you need to so your people are more confident and reassured in what's going to happen. And after you've announced the news, and again, if it's big changes, you will want to check in with your team. How is this news landing? Do they have any concerns that they haven't expressed? So maybe reaching out to certain people and just asking what they feel about it. We want our staff to know that how they will be impacted by the changes is important to you and that you're going to work through it together. So letting staff know before they get to camp, especially if they're returning staff, is crucial for folks to be prepared, to have had a chance to give input, to grapple with some feelings they may have and not feel blindsided when they get to training and find out you've revamped the entire program. So we don't want staff to feel that you've made all the decisions, but rather that you want to explain where the decisions have come from. So, that you didn't just decide, woke up one morning and went, just going to change all this, but that it's come from the evals, from the campers, from the families, from the staff themselves, and why you're wanting to implement these changes, and that you're always open to feedback. So we want to let them know that we're going to try these new ideas, that you will give because they're dedicated staff members, that they're going to give their all to these new changes. And as Gab said, you're going to let them practice and all of that. And because you need some time to experiment with them, and that if things don't work out, that you're going to be open to either reversing the change. So maybe you've decided everyone's going to wake up 15 minutes earlier every day. Or maybe you're going to allow all the campers to keep their cell phones on them all the time. And this is just not working as you get into summer. So you're going to let them know that you're open to making tweaks and changes because you're trying something out together, and that you'll brainstorm together to try something new. So we just want to remember in these cases that leaders don't force people to follow them. They invite them on this journey, and this will be your best friend as you implement change.
Yeah, that's so important. It's like because you're part of the process of the change.
Mhm.
You already have the why, you already have the story. That's like 70% of change
Yes.
is accepting it into your DNA.
Yeah.
So you've already been convinced. And everybody else, it's like asking them to jump into like freezing cold water. And some people are comfortable with it depending on the type of water. Other people, we need to slowly change the temperature so that it's not uncomfortable and doesn't cause sort of fear. I would say also with what you were talking about feedback, I think opening up to feedback, I think, is really important. Beth, you've taught me this in your "let me make myself perfectly clear"
Hmm.
sentence that you use sometimes for
Yep.
staff training. Let me make myself perfectly clear. Life jackets is not negotiable.
Right.
We're doing
Yep.
life jackets.
Hmm.
How we're checking life jackets, how we're making it fun for the kids, that I'm open to
Yep.
conversation, and I
Absolutely.
think it's important and it's reassuring for people to know what we're talking about. My camp has, for like a lot of camps, have been um untangling the uh, harmful narrative of appropriation within our camp. We're,
Mm-hmm.
over 100 years old. There's a
Yep.
lot of things that we have to shift within our community, our culture, our buildings, names, et cetera, et cetera. I had to say, let me make myself perfectly clear. The name changing is not up for negotiation. Creating a safer space is not up for negotiation. But how we do this and how we do
Yep.
that, I would love your input. So I love that.
Thank you. That is
Yeah.
great clarification. Absolutely. All right. When do you have anything else before I move us along?
Before you move it, no, no.
No, you're
Oh,
good. Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
I
Cool.
mean, I could talk about this for hours.
Well, you can save it for your best practice.
I love it.
Okay. When you get to camp, you're going to need to add time into training to teach any new skills or changes to the schedule or to practice any new, maybe emergency procedures, whatever it is. And it's important that you are patient and give them time to get used to them and to share their thoughts and ideas and truly listen to any concerns. So, camp staff, we often about them as like cogs in a wheel of a machine. I've even done an experiential training on that. But really, they're not cogs in a machine. It's more like we're living organisms connected by a common goal. And we have to remember that organisms come with feelings and stress and questions. And camp is many people's safe place. And staff can have issues with anyone trying to make changes to their safe place. So, listening to them as you work through and practice changes also will help you to empower them. So front load that as you're trying new things or practicing new skills, that it will likely feel awkward at first, or it won't be as fun or efficient or as comfortable as it's going to be in the coming days. And I would, put your staff into well thought out discussion groups and ask them to come up with any concerns or issues they might have before they start. Have a spokesperson share those with the larger group and then send them back to come up with ways that they can try new things out that'll help them to have better success. So they're kind of in that mindset of, we've talked this through, we know it might be hard. Here are some ideas to help us through it, because giving them that chance to be heard will ensure a much better start to any changes you want to make. And these are just the ones that require some sort of practice, not ones where you say, we're going to have the kids go brush their teeth before campfire instead of after. It's different. And then, of course, you need to check in with them. So maybe at the end of each day of training, you sit down together and say, so how's it going? How is the change to the schedule working for folks? How does the change to meals of how you're served feel? Have they thought of any other things to discuss or avoid about the changes to drop off and pick up before parents arrive? And of course, this thing is really key if you're implementing changes, to celebrate the wins. So this is going to give folks a sense of accomplishment. Giving shout outs to folks who have contributed positively to the new changes each day is also going to help to inspire people. So don't forget to offer support and coaching and lead with empathy, making sure your staff know that you're good with them making mistakes and learning from them, because you're going to do the same. So it's just kind of coaching them through these changes and allowing places for feedback where they know they can make them. Like, as Gab said, not in terms of safety, if you've made a policy about changes to life jackets, but where they can give you feedback and what you want to hear from them and their input. Okay. All right. And it's now time for Gab's famous recap.
Recap,
Tomato,
recap.
tomato, tomato.
Recap. All right, everybody. So interesting when I get to look at my notes afterwards, taking a bird's eye view. What I see is actually a clock. And
Hmm,
I'll tell you a little bit more about that. Change and time have come up almost the same amount of times in this podcast.
interesting.
Changed a little bit more, but time was right behind it. So the things that both Beth and I both mentioned when it came around time is that if it's a big change, you need to plan for more time. If it's a little change, less time.
Hmm.
Front loading when is really important when you're going to let your staff members know of this change. Staff training, how much time can you spend in planning on not just the say, but the do part? And then feedback, let's make sure that there's enough time for feedback and recognition afterwards. So time and timing is a really important part when it comes to our change. So are people. So onboarding individuals onto the change, telling them the why, telling them the importance, but also opening it up to them in problem solving on how you can create that delivery, how people can practice it is going to be integral. That's not just coming from you, but it's coming from other people. I also loved what Beth was talking about in looking at the outcome, who should be involved, and also making sure you have a reassurance policy. And I think reassurance is so important when it comes to change. We don't know what people are going through. Change can bring up some really big feelings, and sort of having a reassurance policy and a recognition piece in place is super, super important. I love chatting with you about this with you, Beth, today. Thank you so much.
It has been my pleasure, as always, Gabrielle. All right. As we wrap up, don't forget to let us know any topics you would like us to discuss, any guests you recommend we have on the show, because this year, I think probably every other podcast, Gab and I will be joined by someone from the industry who has great stuff to share. So if you've got any ideas, we'd love to hear. Any great leadership training tips, we would love to hear from you because we say it all the time. We're all about sharing so we can raise all the boats together. And if you found our podcast to be useful, we'd love it if you could leave us a rating and a review in your podcast app. Gab, how can they get a hold of you if they want to connect with you?
Yeah, if you want to reach me, you can email me at info@waro.com, OUARAU.com, and you can also check out where I work at waro.com.
Thank you. You can find out all about what we do at gocamp.pro or reach me individually at Beth at gocamp.pro. And for our next podcast, we are going to be diving into staff hiring. Yes,
Oh,
yes, tis time. Tis
it
time.
is.
Our final segment on each podcast is a best practice for leadership training. And again, let us know yours because we'd love to share them out. This week's best practice comes from Gabrielle.
Oh, thank you so much. And mine is very, very simple. Best practice is Sharpies and tape. Sharpies and tape are something at camp that are always missing. We desperately need them. And I have, oh, and garbage bags. So a long time ago, I've would purchase out of our camp budget almost double the Sharpies that we use every summer and tape and garbage bags, and I hide them in my bedroom in at camp. Nobody goes in my bedroom. And when somebody needs Sharpies, tape, or garbage bags, I'll say, let me see what I can do. And then I would go grab some and give it to them. And it was like, if somebody needs it, it is something that is you're so desperate for, and it's just such a nice gift. And you're asking, why don't you have garbage bags at your camp? We do have garbage bags, but you have to sort of haggle with the kitchen staff for the garbage bags, and they all go low so quickly. But this is usually for like personal projects or personal things. And so just having whatever your staff needs, and it's not that expensive, if you can um, have instead of having it, in your inventory where people have access to it, keep it yourself, and then if somebody needs it in a pinch, you've got it on hand. And those are the three things that I would say makes me my staff like me more, and I do anything I can to have them like me more.
That's great. I will give you a teeny little hint on what I used to do about Sharpies that went missing
Tell
all the
me.
time. Of course, black Sharpies are the most popular. And I would have some on my desk, but I put yellow caps on them. So everyone thought they were yellow
That is so
Sharpies.
brilliant.
And then nobody took them.
Yeah.
So just another way to ensure that things don't go missing at camp when you need them
Oh,
to be.
it's so
But
good.
having that extra little supply closet of things is a smart thing to do, where you can come in and be the hero for a few minutes.
Yes, and they're really good at putting things back, but you know, eventually you get to that week 6 and it's just
Hmm.
everything's depleted and you just can't go without sharpies, duct tape, or garbage bags. You just can't. You need it. So
Great. Well, thanks, Gab.
thanks.
And Camp Code is part of the Go Camp Pro podcast network. Check out all of our other podcasts at gocamp.pro/podcast. There are ones there for day camp folk, for camp owners, for counseling staff. It's all kinds of them. So check them all out. Thank you again for joining us on this journey as we work to give our campers, our staff, our families, and camps the best experience possible. Thanks so much for the listening, friends.